You know what's wild? A lot of people don't realize that Jesus actually plays a huge role in Islam. Like, it's not some minor footnote. He's one of the most important figures in the entire religion. In Islam, Jesus isn't just respected, he's considered one of the greatest prophets ever. They call him Isa. And here's the part that blows a lot of people's minds. Muslims believe in the virgin birth. Mary, or Maryam, as she's called in Arabic, is honored in the Qur'an more than in most other scriptures. She has a whole chapter named after her. Think about that for a second. Now here's where it gets interesting. Jesus in Islam did all these miracles, healing the blind, curing lepers, even raising people from the dead, but they make it very clear he didn't do it on his own. It was God working through him. No ego attached, no look at me, I'm divine, just pure servant of God stuff. And the big distinction, Muslims don't see Jesus as the Son of God. To them, he's not part of a trinity, not divine. He's a messenger, a prophet, a human being chosen by God. That's a huge shift from how most Christians view him. Then there's the crucifixion part. Islam teaches that Jesus wasn't actually killed on the cross. Instead, God raised him up and someone else was made to look like him. So the whole sacrifice and resurrection story, it plays out totally differently in Islamic belief. And maybe the most mind-bending part of all, Muslims believe Jesus is coming back. End times, last days, all of that. He returns, defeats the Antichrist, restores justice. So in both Christianity and Islam, he's got this massive role at the end of the world. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Two of the world's biggest religions, billions of followers, and both agree on Jesus being this incredibly important figure, even if they disagree on exactly who he is. In Islam, Jesus is known as Isa ibn Maryam, which literally means Jesus, the son of Mary. The Quran presents him as one of the greatest prophets, and his name is mentioned more than 20 times throughout the scripture. He holds a status of deep reverence, standing alongside prophets like Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Muhammad. Muslims see him as a messenger chosen by God to deliver divine guidance to the people of his time. His role is not just as a religious teacher, but as a figure who represents truth, righteousness, and submission to God's will. What makes his position in Islam particularly unique is the way he bridges the storylines of earlier prophets and prepares the way for the final messenger, Muhammad. He is not treated as a distant historical figure, but as a living part of God's grand narrative that stretches from Adam to the last day. The Quran calls him a word from God and a spirit from him, emphasizing his special creation and mission without crossing into divinity. This distinction is critical because while Christianity elevates Jesus to the level of the divine, Islam holds him firmly as a human chosen by God, maintaining the absolute oneness of God. Muslims believe that Jesus was sent to the children of Israel with the Injil, or Gospel, a scripture that reaffirmed the Torah while also correcting distortions that had crept into earlier practice. His mission was one of renewal and restoration, calling people back to the worship of the one God. This aspect aligns him with the broader Islamic view of prophets as renewers who revive pure monotheism in societies that drift away from it. His miracles, his words, and his very existence were all seen as signs pointing not to himself, but to the Creator. Respect for Jesus in Islam goes beyond theological acknowledgement. His life is presented as an example of humility, devotion, and complete surrender to God. The fact that the Quran repeatedly refers to him with honorific titles, Messiah, Word of God, Spirit from God, shows the unique position he holds. At the same time, the text warns against exaggerating his status beyond what God granted him, reminding believers to admire him as a prophet, but not to worship him as divine. This balance between reverence and strict monotheism captures the Islamic perspective on Jesus. He is a major prophet, a sign of God's power, and a bridge in the prophetic chain, but never separated from his humanity or elevated above God's singular authority. The story of Jesus' birth in Islam is one of the most remarkable narratives in the Quran, and it places special emphasis on the purity, honor, and chosen status of his mother, Maryam. Maryam is considered one of the greatest women in history, singled out by God above all women of her time. Her life is portrayed with dignity, and she is the only woman mentioned by name in the Quran, with an entire chapter dedicated to her story. From the beginning, her life was marked by devotion. Her mother dedicated her to the service of God even before she was born, and she grew up under the care of the prophet Zechariah, known in the Bible as Zechariah. This background sets the stage for her unique role in bringing forth one of God's greatest signs. When the angel Gabriel appeared to her in human form, she was startled, as she had lived a life of chastity and seclusion. The angel reassured her, telling her that God had chosen her for a miraculous purpose. He announced that she would bear a son, though she had never been touched by a man. This news left her in shock, but the angel explained that this was God's command, and when he wills something to happen, he simply says, "Be," and it is. This moment illustrates the central Islamic teaching that God's power is absolute and limitless, not confined by natural laws. Maryam withdrew in seclusion when she became pregnant, enduring the weight of this miracle both physically and emotionally. In the Qur'an, the details of her struggle are described vividly, showing her isolation and her pain. As the time of birth approached, she retreated to a remote place and expressed despair, wishing she had died before facing such hardship. At that moment, God comforted her by providing sustenance and support. A voice called to her, guiding her to shake the trunk of a date palm so that fresh dates would fall for her to eat, and water was made available nearby. This divine assistance during childbirth highlights the closeness of God to those he favors and protects. The birth of Jesus without a father is regarded as a miraculous sign of God's creative power, similar to how Adam was created without parents. In both cases, the Quran emphasizes that such miracles are not evidence of divinity in the created being, but rather demonstrations of God's authority over all creation. For Muslims, the virgin birth is an affirmation of Jesus' unique status and Maryam's unmatched piety, establishing both as extraordinary figures in human history while maintaining the fundamental principle of God's oneness. In Islamic belief, Jesus is recognized not only as a prophet, but also as a figure through whom extraordinary miracles were manifested by the permission of God. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes that these acts were not done through his own power or divinity, but through the will of the Creator. This distinction is important because it preserves the central theme of Islam, absolute monotheism, and the understanding that miracles are signs from God, not evidence of the divine nature of the one performing them. From his earliest days, Jesus' life was marked by miraculous events. According to the Quran, even as a newborn, he spoke from the cradle to defend his mother, declaring that he was a servant of God who had been given revelation and made a prophet. This act itself was a miracle meant to silence the accusations against Maryam and to affirm that her child was born through a divine command. It also set the tone for Jesus' mission as someone who would constantly bear witness to God's truth through both words and signs. As he grew, Jesus performed miracles that displayed both compassion and divine power. The Quran mentions that he healed those who were blind from birth and those afflicted with leprosy, diseases that were considered incurable at the time. These healings were not just acts of mercy, but served to remind people of God's ability to restore health and life when all human means fail. Another miracle described is Jesus raising the dead, again with the condition that it was by God's permission, underscoring that life and death are under God's control alone. A unique miracle attributed to him in Islamic tradition is the creation of a bird from clay. The Quran narrates that he formed a bird shape from clay, breathed into it, and by God's command, it became a living creature. This act paralleled the story of Adam's creation, highlighting that God, who gave life to the first human, could allow his prophet to demonstrate a sign of that same creative power. These miracles reinforced Jesus' role as a prophet and messenger, whose mission was to guide people back to pure worship of God. They were never presented as proof of his divinity, but as clear signs pointing to the reality of God's existence and authority. For Muslims, the miracles of Jesus remain powerful reminders that prophets are supported by divine help, and that extraordinary signs are meant to inspire faith in God, not in the prophet as an object of worship. In Islam, one of the most fundamental beliefs about Jesus is that he is not the Son of God, but rather a prophet and servant of the Creator. The Quran strongly emphasizes the oneness of God, known as Tawheed, which rejects any division of divinity or association of partners with him. Because of this principle, the idea of Jesus being divine or part of a trinity is firmly denied. Instead, he is described as a human being created by God. chosen as a messenger and honored with a special mission. The Quran addresses Christians directly on this point, stating that exaggerating Jesus' status or elevating him beyond prophethood is a distortion of the truth. For Muslims, calling Jesus the Son of God contradicts the concept of God's absolute uniqueness. God is beyond human attributes such as fatherhood or physical relationships, and to assign such qualities to him is seen as limiting his perfection. The Quran uses reasoning to clarify this, pointing out that if God could create Adam without a father or mother, then creating Jesus without a father is not evidence of divinity, but rather a sign of divine power. In this view, Jesus' miraculous birth highlights God's ability to create in different ways, not a suggestion that Jesus himself is divine. The Islamic perspective also makes a distinction between titles and reality. While Jesus is called Messiah al-Masih, this title does not carry the same theological weight as it does in Christianity. It means that he was anointed, chosen, and given a special role, but it does not imply that he shares in God's essence. The Quran insists that Jesus himself never claimed divinity but consistently affirmed his servitude to God. He is portrayed as reminding people to worship God alone and warning against misguidance. Another key aspect is that Islam views the doctrine of the Trinity as a human innovation, something not revealed by God but developed later. For Muslims, pure monotheism means that God has no partners, no equals, and no offspring. This belief preserves a clear distinction between creator and creation, a boundary that must never be blurred. Jesus, despite his miracles, his wisdom, and his closeness to God, remains within the category of created beings, no different in essence from other prophets like Moses or Abraham, though uniquely honored. This understanding allows Muslims to deeply revere Jesus without worshiping him. His greatness lies in his complete devotion and submission to God, serving as a reminder of the ultimate message that every prophet brought, that God is one and only he is worthy of worship. In Islamic teaching, the story of the crucifixion of Jesus is told in a very different way from the Christian narrative. The Quran clearly states that Jesus was not killed nor crucified, but rather it was made to appear so to the people. This verse has been the subject of much discussion among scholars, but the consistent belief in Islam is that God saved Jesus from the plots of his enemies and raised him up to himself. Those who believed they had executed him were in fact deceived, and what they saw was not the reality of what happened. This belief highlights the Islamic view of divine protection over prophets. Just as God saved other messengers in critical moments, such as Noah from the flood or Moses from Pharaoh, he did not allow Jesus to be humiliated or destroyed by his opponents. Instead of a tragic death on the cross, his story is seen as a demonstration of God's power to overturn human plans and preserve the honor of his chosen servants. The Quran stresses that those who claim Jesus was crucified are in doubt and do not possess certain knowledge, relying only on assumptions. Over the centuries, different explanations have been suggested about how the crucifixion appeared to take place. Some Islamic scholars have proposed that another person was made to resemble Jesus and was crucified in his place, while others say that the exact details are known only to God and that human beings should not speculate beyond what has been revealed. What remains constant across interpretations is the rejection of the crucifixion as the actual end of Jesus' earthly life. This difference has significant theological implications. In Christianity, the crucifixion is the central event of salvation, representing the sacrifice of the Son of God for humanity's sins. In Islam, however, salvation is not tied to the death of a prophet, but to individual faith and righteous action. The denial of the crucifixion underscores that prophets are not divine beings who must die for others, but rather messengers whose role is to guide people back to the worship of one God. By raising Jesus instead of letting him be crucified, Islam portrays his story as one of divine rescue rather than sacrifice. His mission did not end with death on the cross, but continues until his eventual return. This perspective preserves the dignity of Jesus as a prophet while reinforcing the Islamic emphasis on God's justice, mercy, and unmatched authority over life and death. In Islam, the belief that Jesus will return at the end of times is a central part of eschatology, and it connects his mission not only to the past but also to the future. Muslims believe that Jesus was not killed or crucified, but raised up by God, and that he will descend again before the day of judgment. His second coming is not seen as the introduction of a new message or a new religion, but as the continuation and completion of his original mission, reaffirming the truth of Islam and the oneness of God. His return is described as one of the major signs of the last day, an event that will dramatically change the course of human history. According to Islamic tradition, Jesus will come back at a time of great turmoil and deception in the world. One of the key events associated with his return is the confrontation with the false Messiah, known as Al-Dajjal. This figure, often compared to the Antichrist, is believed to spread corruption, falsehood, and oppression on earth. Jesus' descent will mark the defeat of this great deceiver, restoring truth and justice for humanity. His victory will symbolize the triumph of divine guidance over human arrogance and falsehood. Islamic narrations describe that Jesus will descend near a white minaret in Damascus, wearing garments that reflect humility, and that his presence will bring peace and stability after an age of chaos. He will not come as a new prophet with a new revelation, but as a follower of the final prophet, Muhammad, and will implement the law of Islam. This act emphasizes the continuity of all prophetic messages, showing that the prophets did not compete with one another but worked for the same truth under one God. Another important aspect of his return is that Jesus will break symbols of false worship and clarify misconceptions about his own identity. It is said that he will break the cross, signifying the rejection of the belief in his crucifixion and divinity, and will call people back to worship God alone. He will also establish justice, abolish tyranny, and ensure fairness in society. Wealth and prosperity will become abundant under his leadership, and peace will prevail in ways the world has not seen before. His mission will last until the time appointed by God, after which he will pass away as all humans do. His return in Islamic belief serves as a powerful reminder of the interconnectedness of prophetic missions and the ultimate sovereignty of God, who controls the unfolding of history and the destiny of creation. So when we step back and look at it all, the picture of Jesus in Islam is powerful and profound. He's honored as one of the greatest prophets, born through a miraculous sign, performing incredible works by God's permission, never claimed to be divine, saved from the crucifixion, and destined to return at the end of time to restore justice. What's fascinating is how two of the world's biggest faiths share such deep reverence for the same figure, even if they see him in very different ways. It challenges us to think bigger, to see the connections across beliefs, and to understand how much common ground exists when we're willing to look for it. Thank you for listening with an open mind. May this spark curiosity, reflection, and maybe even a little more respect for the diversity of faith traditions out there. Good luck on your own journey of learning and discovery, and thank you for being part of this conversation.